She's very close to Debbie Wasserman Schultz in the Democratic Party. I believe she is a Democrat, like
Yes, she
elected.
is.
Yeah, she's elected Democrat.
Yeah.
And that's something like that. Something about Broward and Palm Beach. It's actually very interesting because there is a Tim Canova. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's made accusations that are very in the past election when he was running to challenge Debbie Wasserman Schultz that there were ballots destroyed in his race with Debbie Wasserman Schultz that were illegally destroyed by Brenda Snipes herself, and I think that could be very interesting, something to watch if that gets weaponized. And I mean, personally, I don't think what he should be done. Like, I think there's definitely a difference. I don't think like there, it's a case by case scenario, and I think if Rick Scott tries to use that to weaponize it against Brenda Snipes, and if Tim Canova comes in and is like, well, Brenda Snipes is bad here because she did something bad there. Like, no, because you the thing is you can't say what was bad that he did. Like, it's just ridiculous, or she did. Like, you can't point it out in this scenario, but what you can say is that happened in that case. But I think Brenda Snipes, like, she does have a little bit of a history, and I think it's worth watching. But like, there's no evidence. Like, the time and time again, like, my refrain has been like, show me some sort of evidence of voter fraud, and maybe then we'll consider it. And there has been none. There's been no
Yeah, none.
evidence. None.
None.
Like,
Yeah.
it's been probably the most fake problem I've ever seen pushed so efficiently and so effectively. Like, it's scary that like that's how they're able to do it in such a crazy way. They just push that up so effectively like that. So yeah. Anyways, these new lawsuits, they target the Broward County Supervisor of Elections, Brenda Snipes again, and Susan Buckner, her counterpart in Palm Beach. One lawsuit alleges Snipes and her office counted ballots after the Saturday afternoon deadline. The other two lawsuits against Snipes and Buckner request that voting tabulation machines be impounded when the recount is complete. The lawsuits ask both the women to keep all the ballots and records connected with the election. And so, does this mean, like, what's the action that they have to take at this point in time? Like, how are the people like Brenda Snipes and Susan Buckner, how are they responding?
Well, with the deadline that they had in the lawsuit, Broward actually did comply with it. With the deadline that Rick Scott's campaign magically brought up with their lawsuit that I don't even know how the heck they won. But Palm Beach County, they couldn't get it. I mean, the deadline is too soon. Palm Beach County, I believe, is the third most populous county in the state of Florida. Broward's ahead of them, and Miami-Dade is the most populous. For Palm Beach County to reach a deadline of, I believe it was actually yesterday at 7 p.m., they couldn't do it. Or what was it? I think it was yesterday at 7 p.m. Yeah. They couldn't do it because, I mean, there's so many votes that they would have had to recount. I believe it's like 800,000 people who voted in that election alone in that county. Let me just check quickly. No, excuse me. It's 587,000 people who vote in Palm Beach County. Now, that may seem like a small number compared to Broward, which has 600,000. But, just looking at the facts of Palm Beach County, it's big. They have more precincts actually than Broward. Broward only has 577. Palm Beach has 871. Each of those precincts do have their own election officials. So, it really matters on the fact of whether they can all the ballots in delivered to the Board of Elections headquarters, which is in West Palm Beach. It's not the fact that they don't want to comply. They want to comply, but they want to make sure every vote is counted. They don't want to have to rush and like speed quick, like let's try to get every vote down like 1 minute. No, they can't do that. They got to make sure every vote is correct because they might find some flaws that the machine didn't get. For example, the reason why, in my opinion, I think Broward County was still reporting votes is because there was machine errors. I think, in my opinion, why Broward was still reporting a lot of votes after Election Day was that the machines weren't counting the ballots and there was probably an undervote. According to many people, it was an overvote in the gubernatorial election, which there definitely probably was. But the machines probably were not fully scanning them correctly, or maybe people did just actually undervote in that part of the race. I highly doubt that, though. I probably would doubt that someone wouldn't read throughout the entire ballot. But I think what they had there was they had a prior machine error. The machines weren't reading the ballots. They had a ginormous undervote in that race. And so what Brenda Slimes probably did was she was like, look, I'm not gonna release these results because they're lower than my other races. I'm gonna get all the ballots. I'm gonna start counting them to make sure that they're correct. And you know what they found? They found flaws. They found that people marked outside the box accidentally with the pen, which leaks. They give them Sharpies, which I think is like the stupidest pen to use on a ballot because they typically will expand the second you put them on a paper because the ink likes to go out of the box usually. And the machine miscounted them, had errors, uh, and so I think that's really why they were still reporting votes, and they're still reporting votes. They're not reporting votes right now, but they're definitely going to be reporting votes probably still tomorrow for the recount. But they're still finding votes, definitely. And like when they're bringing up the idea of fraud, it's not fraud. It's machine problems. That's my opinion as to why it went wrong. I might be wrong. I might be completely wrong. That's just what I would think would happen with why they had a problem with reporting votes the day of the election. Now, people are still bringing the idea of fraud, but the idea of fraud with that would make me probably think fraud occurred is if Rick Scott fully won. They had a check mark next to his name on NY Times.
And it was clear.
AP called it, which the AP did not even call it. They still haven't even called it. CNN hasn't called it either.
Has New York
When
Times?
make No, they haven't called it
Yeah.
since either. If they called it and then Brenda Snipes starts still counting votes, that would be, in my opinion, possible voter
Yeah,
fraud.
yeah, yeah.
But that didn't happen. And the idea that there's voter fraud there is just like the biggest lie I've ever heard in the world. It's literally not even truthfulness at all. It's not fact based. Rick Scott couldn't even back up his claim on freaking Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace when he asked him twice about it. The only thing he could talk about is what laws he passed while governor.
Yeah,
And by
and
the
that
way,
was
the only
like
thing
I guarantee you there was no evidence of voter suppression there either. It was just like he just wanted to get Democratic voters suppressed as much as possible through his laws, and he's just bragging about it. And while he's dodging the question, and Chris Wallace is letting him get away with it easily. So, yeah, that's pretty much what went on there. So now we're gonna just want to really go quickly here
okay.
to the Florida governor's race, where Andrew Gillum and Ron DeSantis are going, and that what's up with that?
That race, okay, this was going on that race. Pretty similar as well. The only thing I just wanted to get touched on the Senate race was one county I thought was hilarious. Monroe County, which holds the keys, they had Rick Scott up by literally one vote on Friday night. Now Bill Nelson is leading by 10 votes after a recount. I just think that that was hilarious. Now moving over to the governor race. Well, Ron DeSantis was the expected winner of that race. But Gillum, they're starting a recount, so the check mark next to DeSantis' name has been removed by New York Times and the AP. Gillum has unconceded. He said that he is taking back his words of concession and opening the words of making sure every vote is counted from his unconcession speech that he had, I believe, yesterday.
Mm.
Just looking at this map, there's more red definitely in North Florida than there was in the Senate race. What's going on now in that race, though? Gillum has gotten this threshold of 0.5%, which under Florida state law, the Constitution, I think Section 13B, it states that you have to have a automatic machine recount if it's in a zero point 0.5 margin. For the Senate race, however, they're in the 0.15, and if it stays there, under state law, a 0.25 margin is where they have to have a hand recount of every single ballot throughout the state. I'll get on that in a second because that can cause some problems. But going back to the governor race, they are in the machine recount area right now. So what they're going to start doing is similar to what they've been doing in the Senate race for the past couple of days. They're going to start doing, they're going to start looking at the ballots, looking at the computers, making sure they had any problems, looking at the ballots that had errors. The difference between a machine recount and a hand recount is a machine recount, is where they recount all the ballots that had either an error, and they will possibly count provisional ballots, absentee ballots, all those other ballots. A hand recount is where they count every single ballot. That is the difference between a machine and a hand recount, if no one knows what the difference between them is.
So this is in the whole state, not
Yes,
just like disputed areas.
no, it's in the entire state. So far, they've kept their leads of 49.6 and 49.2 over the past 2 days of the machine recounts. Gillum has gained a big ground so far from the day of the election. The day of the election, it was 40.7 to 40.1%. He only gained 0.1 so far. Personally, for me, I don't think he's going to win this one. I think the only guy who has a chance of winning after the recount would probably be Nelson, but that's going to be a definitely a hard race for him. Because even with the recounts they've been doing with the Senate race, they've been also recounting for the gubernatorial, and Gillum hasn't really been gaining ground, which is really a reason why I personally believe that Nelson probably is the guy who has a higher chance. And also, Nelson probably had a lot of Republican voters who are going for him, because a lot of the counties in North Florida that went solid red for DeSantis went tilt red for Scott.
So he's his moderation kind of attracted more to them.
Yeah. For example, Escambia County, which is the most northwestern county, which holds Pensacola, which is a high naval area.
It's the Panhandle area, right?
Yeah, Panhandle area, yes. They have a high naval area. That went actually likely red in both of them. And the 50 was 59.0, 41.0 in the Senate race, and the gubernatorial was 57.8 to 40.8 in the gubernatorial election. But really, just looking at the map completely, there's definitely more blue on the Senate map than there is on the gubernatorial map, especially in North Florida compared to the gubernatorial map. But I think what the problem happened here is Gillum got a lot of the young people voting in primary, which is why he surpassed Gwen Graham. Gwen Graham she did have some young votes, definitely she did. She did have a lot of young voters who were for her, which is why she was only a 3% difference between him and Gillum. Excuse me, her and Gillum. And the only reason why I think Gillum lost is because, think about it, the college kids are away at school. The next break is Thanksgiving, which is after the election day. Early ballots don't start in 2 weeks until the election, which that's October. That was October. The early voting in Florida started October 23rd. The kids are still gone at school. So this is why I think that Gillum had lost that election. Many of the young voters in Florida, their way, they didn't do absentee ballots because, look, if I was a young kid out there in Florida and I'm at school looking at the polls, all the polls had Gillum up by like 2-3%.
Yeah,
so
and
he might be fine.
Yeah, and you get kind of get the sense of complacency that's a little very, very dangerous. All right, what I'm going to do here quickly is play for you a little bit, and James, I know you can't hear this, so I'm going to have to give you the rundown after. So this is outside the Broward Supervisor of Election Office. It's pretty tense right now. And then this little actual elected representative, the craziest one, probably, Matt Gaetz from Florida. And he's talking to a Gillum supporter, and it's not very civil. I'm going to play this for you.
The first time. Oh, okay, because you didn't win. Your side didn't win. No. So you gotta come here and you gotta try to get people to go change their
He's absolutely screaming at this guy.
Have you read the law? Have you read the law? Have you read the law? Yeah. Before I school you, have you read the law? You don't get to go in and argue with ballots. No. The law stipulates that's been there for years. The law says if the ballots are very close, if the voting is very close, it has to have a recount.
Well, that's fine.
All right, then. So what in God's name are you screaming about? What are you screaming about? That's exactly what we're saying.
No. A recount is to put the ballots in the machine and to see who voted which way. It's not to go change the votes. That's the mistake. You were telling that man to go. We gotta go get you in there to see if you're ballot.
You can't vote.
You don't get to do that.
Yeah, so that's pretty much this one dude who's surrounded by 15 crazy goon Trump supporters and real actual congressmen who are just being yelled at for saying something as a joke, oh, you got to get him in there and go work those votes or something like that. And you got Matt Gaetz absolutely screaming at this one poor Gillum supporter outside the office, and Jesus. And it's just I wrote this. I sent this to you about this whole thing with the election. It's just. These supporters, they just can't. It was the same thing back in 2000 when George Bush, literally overrunning the office full with, legitimately fake protesters. And they were coming in and saying, oh, this happened, and I didn't like it. Oh, it was so bad. It was just the absolute worst. It wasn't working. And it just kept going, and now they're trying the same strategy here. It's just a bunch of mob protesters out there. Talk about mobs, actually trying to get in the way of recounting and letting the professionals do their jobs. And again, it comes back to the same theme. If you have any evidence, please feel free to share it. But there's no evidence. There's no evidence of foul play. There's nothing going on. It's just the fact that you guys are losing. And if Gillum turns out to lose, will you see Democrats come in and throw their hands up? I really don't think so. I think they're just going to say, okay, we lost. Let's move on. It happened.